so the last type of bug hotel I want to talk about is one that's aimed at bees. So these aren't really hotels, they're supposed to be nesting sites for solitary bees. So in the UK there's about 270 different types of bee, and of those 250 approximately are solitary bees. So these are bees that don't live in colonies like bumblebees and honeybees, they actually live on their own. And a lot of them will nest in cavities. So many of them will nest in holes in the ground, but some of them will nest higher up, in things like holes in walls and trees. So things like the red mason bee will nest in holes in brick walls, hence the name. So what they're doing is they're looking for a chamber or a tube to lay their eggs in. And what they'll do is they'll create a series of these chambers. So they'll lay their egg in the chamber, they'll fill it with pollen for the larvae to eat when it hatches out. They'll seal it up with a plug, and then they'll create another chamber, they'll lay their egg in that, and then they'll seal that one up with a plug, so you end up with a series of chambers. And the larvae, well, the eggs will hatch out and the larvae will stay in here over the winter, and they'll emerge the following spring. Okay, so that's how they work. Now there's several different things you need to remember when you're thinking about making a nesting site for your solitary bees. And there's a lot of things that can go wrong with them as well, so there's lots of different things to think about. So the first thing is, how long is the tube? To really be effective, the tube needs to be about 15 centimetres long. So if you think about this bee hotel, although it looks very nice, if you measure it, these tubes are only 6 centimetres long, so they're nowhere near long enough. So although this looks very pretty, realistically it's not going to have a lot of value to our bees. Also the width of the tube is important. So sometimes the bee hotels or bee nurseries that you buy have not been produced for British bees, so their holes might be too big. So really they want to be about 5 millimetres. Anywhere between 2 and 10 will be okay, but about 5 is perfect. So really this one, a lot of the holes are too big and they're not long enough. So although it looks nice and you might get other creepy crawlies going in there, it's not going to be very good for bees. So that one's out, I'm afraid. I've been joined by my chickens, and that's what the strange noises are if you can hear clucking. This one's a bit better. So these tubes are much longer, so they might be long enough for our bees, and they're sealed. They are sealed at the end, so that's good as well. So the tubes don't want to be open at both ends. But if you put this on the floor, it wouldn't be any good because the bees like to be higher up. So this one might be okay as long as it's high enough off the ground, sort of this height, perhaps on the shelf. So another common problem with these bee nurseries is that they can become a hotbed for parasites and mites, which might infect the bees and be really detrimental to them. So the last thing you want to do is try and help your bees and actually end up introducing lots of parasites and diseases into their population. So it's really important that either your bee hotel is thrown away if it's been used and you can't clean it out, or you clean it out and replace the tubes. So a lot of the sort of properly sort of targeted ones, like things for red mason bees, you can buy these replacement tubes. So each season in the spring, if the eggs have hatched out and the larvae have emerged, and the bees have finished using them before the next season, you can take the tubes out and replace them with new ones. Alternatively, some other ones you can clean as well. So the size and length of the tube is important. You need to make sure you can clean them, and where you situate them is important as well. So they need to be kind of about 1.5 metres off the ground. You need to have a nice clear entrance approach, and they need to be somewhere nice and sunny and warm as well. So something else you can do, you can create sort of a bee nursery by drilling holes in the end of a log like this. And this is a really great way, really easy way and simple way of producing a bee nursery. The only problem with this is that you can't really clean it out easily. So if it does get used, it's probably best to throw it away after a couple of seasons because you don't want those parasites to build up. Another important thing is that your bee hotel or bee nursery is nice and secure. So you want it in a sunny position, but you don't want it to be swinging around, and so it needs to be fixed to something so it's nice and stable. So those are sort of some key things to think about if you're having a go at making a bee nursery. So if you haven't got the specialist tubes and you want to have a go at making one at home, things like bamboo canes can be perfect. But if you've got knots in, which often bamboo does, the bees won't be able to get through that knot. So if you are using bamboo tubes for your bee nursery, make sure that it hasn't got too many knots in. Make sure you've got a nice length, about 15 centimetres long without a knot. Often they'll be a bit big, so try and use ones that have got that sort of 5mm diameter for the hole. And make sure you can take them out as well, so if they get used you can replace them with new ones the following season. Another thing that's really good to use for this is elder. So you can recognise elder by the flowers and the berries later in the year, but all year round it's got this sort of spotty bark. And although we could refer to it as the elder tree, it's not actually a tree, it's a shrub. And it's really useful because at the end, if you look, it's actually got this pithy bit in the centre. So if you cut a length of elder, you can use a tent peg or something similar to carefully push that pith out, and then you're left with a perfect tube like this. So these are ones that we often use when we're making these with children, and they can be really handy, especially if you haven't got bamboo or specialist bead tubes. You could also potentially use paper straws, but don't use plastic straws because these bee nurseries need to be breathable. And also sometimes you see bee hotels made sort of from plastic bottles, and although they'll keep them nice and dry, you really need the air to be able to circulate around these tubes if they're being used. So it's best to use natural materials like wood if you can, to keep them nice and dry. Okay, so hopefully that's given you some pointers about what to do and what not to do if you're trying to encourage solitary bees. You can buy some specialist hotels, so if you're worried you're not doing it right, it might be worth investing in a proper one, and some of them even have cool observation chambers on the side so you can see if they're being used. But yeah, so if you see one in a garden centre or somewhere and you think, oh, it's really nice, just have a little bit of a think about how practical it is going to be for your bees, because the last thing we want to do is cause harm to the bees when we really want to be attracting them. Okay, so hopefully that's given you some food for thought. We've got our bee nurseries that you can have a go at. We've got our bug hotels with all the different, I'm not sure where I put it now, with all the different like nooks and crannies that there is. Things like ladybirds and lacewings to sort of hide in, stay nice and dry, so they need to be somewhere nice and sheltered. And then we've got the simplest option to encourage creepy crawlies, which is our old dead logs, stones, old bits of brick, so somewhere nice and damp and cold. Alright, so hopefully that's given you some ideas, some pointers, some things to think about, so how you can encourage all these beneficial insects into your garden. Okay, thank you, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye.